Good morning. Nice to see you're still awake. Wonderful, thank you. I have no formal thanks. Very Reverend Father, Vice Rectors, Academic Senate, Deans, Department Heads, faculty, assistants, but mostly the students. Mostly the students. Thank you for being here this morning. Thank you for the honor of conferring on me an honorary professorship at this extremely prestigious university in Asia, the oldest in Asia. It is indeed a great, great honor for me, and I most humbly accept it and most sincerely appreciate it. By the end of this little lecture, you will have some idea of who I am and where I come from. Not where I come from originally, which was London, but where I come from intellectually these days in this rapidly changing world. And I'll try not to mention politics. It's tough. But you'll understand my politics by the end of this. Anyway. So I want to talk to you a little bit today. No, let me back up a minute. You know, the future is about the students. It's not about old folks like me. I can only throw out some ideas there. But the people who really matter here are the students, because they're the people who 20, 30 years from now will be the change agents. They're the ones who we at any university are training to be agents of change for the future. So part of what I'm going to talk to you about today is change. Now, for some of you, change may be something that you're not used to. Maybe you're uncomfortable with it. We'll talk about that. What I can say to you today is that by the end of this lecture, I hope to have moved at least some hearts and minds from where you are now to somewhere else. That's what I'm offering you today in terms of my thanks to you for this award you have bestowed upon me. Natural products matter. One of the concepts that's been very important to me over the years, particularly more recently, is the concept of gratefulness. It's the concept of thinking every day of what we can be grateful for. So, for example, as we look around this room, we see lots of things to be grateful for, lots of things that have been created out of nature in order for us to be here today. If you had a cup of coffee this morning or a cup of tea, where do you think that came from? The food you ate is not synthetic food, it's natural food. Yet as we go through, we very often forget some of these aspects of life. So I'm going to remind you a little bit about some of those aspects. Of course, today, as we think a little bit about things, we are thinking in terms of Is this not working? I'm sorry. Oh, there we go. Thank you. So we're going to introduce the concept of natural products matter. We're going to talk about deep work and what deep work really means in the context of our daily lives. Because that context of deep work is very important, as we'll see, with respect to change. We're going to think a little bit about the world in 2030, which is only a few years away. We're going to talk a little bit about climate change and how that might be impacting your future. And we're going to talk a little bit about some challenges for that period of time. And we're going to dream. We're going to dream. Nature. Nature provides us foodstuffs. It provides us utensils, the handicrafts, the construction, resins, gums, and waxes that we see all around us. Perhaps we don't think about, well, where do they come from? Where do they come from? The flavoring agents, excuse me. Can you go back, please? There we go. Flavoring agents and spices, the perfumes and the cosmetics, the prescription and the OTC products, traditional medicines, which so many people around the world use. Phytotherapeuticals, that's the same name for the same product, maybe in a different culture. Maybe in Europe it's called phytotherapeuticals, other parts of the world it's called traditional medicines. Herbicides and insecticides that are naturally sourced. Next slide. Interestingly enough, St. Hildegard of Bingen, going way back, 11th, 12th century, had a very profound statement. The earth which sustains humanity must not be destroyed. Must not be destroyed. For without it, we, all of us together, and that doesn't just mean humans, but it also means the animals as well, and everything that's in living nature, we cannot survive. Global health. There's two aspects to global health. Global health, first of all, recognizes that access to health care is a human right, and that's written into the WHO Constitution from 1946. Very clear statement. At the same time, a healthy people, and we all want to be healthy, because it's only when we're healthy that we can be productive. A healthy people require a healthy earth. So maintaining the health of the earth becomes a very important aspect of our very survival and the survival of everything that is living around us. So what's important here then is that interdisciplinary collaboration is needed. This is not something that happens just by one person or one group of people. It happens by interdisciplinary collaboration with lots of different expertises being brought together to both conserve the environment and alleviate the disease burden. And we're going to get more into that in just a few moments. One of our major concerns, and we're going to see this a little bit later on, is the concern of climate change. And the top two, although it almost looks like one, but the top two photos were taken by CNN. And you can see these on the CNN website. And they're taken in Beijing. It's the Beijing skyline. The top one was taken at around the time, I think there was a G20 summit meeting in Beijing. And so CNN took this photo. But prior to that, the 2 weeks before that, they took the photo before the Chinese government had closed down the factories and limited trucks and limited traffic and so on and so forth. So this is what we're living in. This is our environment. This is what we're doing to ourselves. And the numbers of people who die as a result of pollution is now steadily rising around the world. But of course, one of our major concerns is also what's happening in this environment, whether that's the Antarctic or the Arctic, the melting ice, and we'll get into that just a little bit later. Rockefeller Foundation, combining with the Lancet, had a commission that put together, or really more than a statement, a series of statements based on reviews, and you can look this up online, to realize economic and development gains in the present. So if you're a person who thinks about the future a lot, in the way that I do, that's a concern. That's a concern. My concern is my daughter and her family, her daughter, son, families in the future. What are we doing for the future, for future generations? What is it that we are creating here? In many times, an irretrievable way. So the Commission went on to say that societies must address the drivers of environmental change by promoting sustainable, and you will hear that word a lot in this presentation, by promoting sustainable and equitable patterns of consumption, reducing population growth, and harnessing the power of technology for change. harnessing the power of technology for change. And that was just mentioned in terms of artificial intelligence. And we're going to come back to artificial intelligence as well in just a couple of moments here. Next slide. So what are the mitigators of a healthy planet in this anthropogenic era, this era when the impact of human activity is having a major effect on the environment, on the world for the future that is left? So one of them, of course, is population growth. The more people you have, the more resources you use. But also we have to look at habitat and biodiversity loss. So you see in the top part here, you've got a nice green tropical rainforest, and then it's being cleared for whatever purpose, to create a golf course, to create rangelands, or whatever. We've got the impact of climate change, whether that's increased fires, and we know in Australia, sadly, there's been a tremendous number of fires, as there has been in Southern California with the drought. Increased viciousness of some of the storms, and you're very, very familiar in this part of the world with the intensity of the typhoons. But one of the other aspects here is the aspect of time. Time is moving very rapidly, and it's time for change. It's time to be thinking differently, and it's time for all of us, to be concerned about how we can contribute in our own individual small way to improving things for the future, or at least not making them that much worse. So Frank and Ernest go to the vicar. And of course they say, when you say that the meek will inherit the earth, do you mean as is? It's a very serious question. It's a very serious question. It becomes more serious as time goes on. What is it that we are relinquishing as we pass on to our antecedents, to those who would come after us, to those who would inherit what we are creating here? So a quick Zen story. We're going to flip religions here. We're going to go to Buddhism. So there's a peasant working in the field who sees a king riding by at high speed. And cries out, "Your Majesty, where are you going at such a pace?" That's not really a peasant's accent, is it? Sorry. But, "Your Majesty, where are you going at such a pace?" To which the king replies, "I don't know. Ask the horse." That's us. That's where we're in. That's the position we're in at the moment. Because are we as scientists the king? Are we as scientists the king in this scenario? And are the evolving technologies, and the technologies are unbelievable and becoming more and more intense, are we in charge of those technologies? And that's where this issue of artificial intelligence is going to be so important in the future. It's already important. I'll give you an example a bit later on. But do we know where that is taking us? Do we really know? Are we in charge of that? And is it for the benefit of society? That's something that we need to keep up with. It's wonderful. It's incredible. It's creative. And it's transforming our lives. Are all those benefits? What are the compromises that we make there? There was a wonderful movie called Ex Machina which looked at robotics, very sophisticated robotics. This was a billionaire who decided to go off and make robots. And he creates the robot Ava. And of course, Ava in this movie becomes sentient. It's created that way. And Ava asks, "What happens to me if I fail your test?" Because she is being tested. She's being tested as a full robot, as a full female robot. So the question is, well, here you've created something that has the ability to think rationally. the state of the world's plants, because obviously that's very dear to my heart. I'm a natural product chemist now. And the Royal Botanic Gardens in Kew says that there's now about 391,000 vascular plants. You don't have to worry about the rest of it, but go to the bottom. The bottom says that more than 10% of Earth's vegetation has a high sensitivity to climate change. High sensitivity to climate change. I give a whole lecture sometimes on Alice in Wonderland and the relationship of Alice in Wonderland to natural products. And it's absolutely interesting how close some of the aspects of Alice in Wonderland are to natural product chemistry. But one of the most important concepts is, we're all mad here, says the Cheshire Cat to Alice. What we're doing here is not sane. It's not sane. The way we're treating our Earth, the Earth that we cannot live without, is not healthy. So here too, the way we use the world's resources. This is an example, a local example. This is Borneo and the devastation of the biodiversity in Borneo since about 1950 to what is projected for 2020. This is the coverage for this island over the period of time. And I'm sure that there's islands like that here. There's places like this, many places like this around the world. So there's this loss of biodiversity, whether it's through the burning of the forest, whether it's through the cutting, the plowing down of the burnt trees to make grazing lands. But there's also a loss of traditional knowledge. There's a loss of people. People like this, people from somewhere like the Nakshi community in Shangri-La. Yes, there is a Shangri-La. It's in Yunnan province in China. So this loss of traditional knowledge, loss of the people who have the relationship between the humans and plants for the purposes of healing. We're not collecting that knowledge in an adequate manner. You're not collecting that knowledge here in an adequate manner. That's a resource. It's a healthcare resource. And we're going to talk about that in some lectures that I'm going to give here a little bit later on that anybody is welcome to. There's an irony in all of this. One of the ironies is that the Hubble telescope, which is an absolutely amazing device, technological device, out there, looks at the universe in stunning detail, absolutely stunning detail, and will tell us about galaxies that are many, 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 many light years away. There was a report last week on the sun with the 7 planets, right, that are somewhat similar to Earth. The truth, however, is we know almost nothing about Earth. We don't know, for example, where the medicinal plants are that we need in order for healthcare systems around the world. So, for example, around 64% of Earth's people use plants on a daily basis for healthcare. But we don't know where they are located. You don't know where medicinal plants that are used in your healthcare system by traditional healers, you don't know where they are. So we know a lot more around the galaxies of the universe than we do about the medicinal plants on Earth. I find that ironic. So we're at a crossroads about how we want to proceed. And of course, that very famous American philosopher, Woody Allen, says, more than any time in history of mankind, it's the crossroads. One path leads to despair and utter hopelessness, the other to total distinction. I pray we have the wisdom to choose wisely. I do too. But that's where we're at. And it's going to take all of us working together in order to make that situation possible for future generations. So is there a right way or a wrong way? Which way are we going here? What is the correct pathway? What is the correct pathway that we can be following here as scientists? Part of it is of change. We can't bury our heads in the sand. We can't ignore what is right out there in front of us, facing us on a day-to-day basis. And at the same time, change, the capacity to change, begins within each of us. But first, we need to ask about time. Because time is very much associated with change. Because we need to do what is called deep work. What is called deep work. So we need the time to do that. So who are you? Who are you? Is this your daily journey in life, the top one? Those ruts in the road? It's an old Roman road, but you see the ruts there. Is that your daily life? Stuck in a rut? Is your life like a treadmill? Run, 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 run. Back to the ruts. Back to the ruts. Run, 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 run. Really? Is that your life? Then where is your time? I mean, this is me. This is sometimes me. I ask you, is your nose to the grindstone every day? For me, it's writing my book on alkaloid biosynthesis. So he tells you, teach this, teach that. Nobody tells you about writing papers, all the stuff, social networks. You know, you've got time. You don't have those other pressures. So we actually live in a world that is very deep in distraction, away from the creativity that's implicit in deep work. George Bernard Shaw says that those who cannot change their minds cannot change anything. So if we don't create the time and work on that aspect, it won't happen. Because we need that cognitive space, both to refresh our thinking, to make sure that we're on the right track, on that right way, and to change what we do and how we do it, to be creative. But change also requires intentionality. And one of the great practitioners of kind of New Age thinking in the United States, George Leonard, says, ultimately, human intentionality is the most powerful evolutionary force on this planet. Right? Under a higher power. And without intentionality, we don't have the productivity. In other words, we have to make a positive step. We have to have an intention. And whether that's the young people, anybody else who has administrative responsibilities, teaching responsibilities, what is your intention here? You have to be very clear about that. Let's go back to Buddhism again. One of my favorite Buddhist monks, now deceased, Ajahn Chah, who wrote a book many years ago. He was a monk in Ubon Ratchathani province in southeast Thailand. And I visited his monastery one time. And he says, if you are on the 5th step and you think you are too high, you will never make it to the 6th. If you're on the 5th step and you think you are too high, you'll never make it to the 6th. So it's about the principle of how do we think that we can improve our situations, improve what we're doing, improve our science, improve our practices, improve our relationships with people, improve our collaborations. How do we do all that? Because we can make it better. We can make it better. But it requires a change, which means it requires an intention. So that got me thinking about medicines, sustainable medicines. And for a long time, I did a lot of work with WHO here in Manila, just up the road here down in United Nations Avenue. And This is how traditional medicine looks around the world. So many people, for them, that is their primary medicine. That is how they are healed. So not everybody has access to all the pills. They have access to material like this, or this, or this, or this. So how do you make that sustainable? How do you bring that notion of maintaining access? Pharmacognosy is one of the sciences within pharmacy. What I realized after writing a lot about sustainable medicines for a while, I said to myself that there was a missing concept. The missing concept in pharmacognosy, in the practice of doing natural product chemistry and biology and so on and so forth, was that it needs to be sustainable. It's got to be based on sustainable concepts where, in fact, if something does come out of it, whether it's a drug or an insecticide or a herbicide or wherever it is, that it's sustainable. It can be prolonged in terms of availability. So that became an important aspect, and it's turned out to be something that has become both practice-oriented as well as philosophically oriented. And I'm not going to go into any details, too many details about it today, but I want to point out that one of the challenges that we have as individuals and as scientists is to think in terms of how what we're doing is sustainable, or how we can make what we're doing more sustainable, right? That we're using less resources. From a strategic point of view, as I thought about, well, what are the implications of this for this eco-pharmacognosy notion, this sustainability notion, you have to go back to Louis Sullivan. Louis Sullivan was a Chicago architect back in the late 19th, early 20th century, who designed a lot of fabulous buildings, both in Chicago and New York and some other major cities. One of the comments that he made in terms of his architecture school was that form follows function. Form ever follows function. So in other words, you can say that this is a building, right? This auditorium is a building. It was designed as an auditorium. It wasn't designed as a cowshed. Right? So in other words, the function was defined before it was put together. So as we think about our scientific programs, think in terms of function. What is your function in society? What is it that you're trying to do for society? How do you put that together? What's the team that you need in order to put all the aspects of that together so that you have a form, you have a shape to the goal of what you're trying to achieve? So our deep work in natural products is about illuminating the impact of climate change. Number one, because climate change is going to have a dramatic effect in terms of traditional medicines, in terms of natural products, in terms of essential oils. Because as soon as you change the climate, you change the chemistry. Let me say that again. As soon as you change the climate, you change the chemistry. So that's got a very deep meaning. Very deep meaning indeed. In terms of resourcing vegetables, in terms of resourcing various other crops. I'm not going to go into that today, but it's very deep. How do we respond? How do we respond as natural product scientists to global healthcare issues? How do we respond to the loss of biodiversity? How do we improve global access? I'm going to give you an example of that in just a moment. How do we challenge conventional natural product thinking? Because natural products is also stuck. They're stuck here, and they need to move somewhere over here. How do we foster that? How important is collaboration versus individuality? And that just applies generally. It's not just about natural products. That applies whether you're doing physics, whether you're doing math, whether you're involved in various aspects of the health sciences. How do you foster collaboration? And where does where does that collaboration meet with the activities of the individual and the aspirations of the individual? That we should be developing only sustainable natural products. We don't want to work on a product where you need to cut down a tree in order to have a drug. That's not appropriate anymore. How do we make sustainable practice improvements? In other words, how do we use electricity at a lower level in what we do? How do we use less energy? How do we clean up our act? How do we have renewable sources of materials? But most importantly, and this may surprise you, because I'm a basic scientist, except that when I think of basic science now, I start over here with the pink people. But then not everyone is pink, of course, but they're pink on the slides. The patient. What are we doing for the patient in natural product healthcare? How do we make that a priority? Not the science the priority, but how do we improve the lot of society in terms of patient care by improving the sciences that go into that product that the patient consumes, that the patient takes? So one of the diagrams that I put together that relates to this is that the patient is at the center, and that the patient requires what I call QSEC. QSEC. QSEC on the left here is quality, safety, efficacy, and consistency. Excuse me 1 minute. Everybody knows what this is, right? A bag of M&Ms. QSEC. Quality, safety, efficacy, and consistency. I can travel anywhere around the world and I can buy M&Ms and they taste the same. Right? You can't say that for any traditional medicine. You can't say that for a dietary supplement. It's a very important concept. So in other words, if you're going to provide health care, one of the key factors is consistency. Consistency in a product. We need to look at the dark side. Ecopharmacognosy has a dark side. Pharmacognosy has a dark side. Traditional medicine has this dark side. We've already seen that this western black rhinoceros went extinct in 2013 when the last one died. This is a northern, I think it's a northern white rhinoceros. I think there are 4 of those left in the world. And part of that is because of traditional medicine. We need to own that as traditional medicine practitioners. Part of that is because of illicit harvesting. The same is true of bear gallbladder and musk oil. So there's this other side from an ecopharmacognosy point of view, how do we substitute? How do we convince people that they don't need to be taking rhinoceros horn? That there's something else out there that's an alternative. I'm going to flick over this. I'm sorry. Whoops, sorry. So I want to go back to the future. And I've got a TARDIS there, of course. I'm sure some of you are familiar with Doctor Who. So a TARDIS is involved with time and relative dimensions in space. And that's what we need to be doing because we're going to be traveling in the future now. Population is about 7.44 billion today. Whoops, sorry. What happened? 7.44 billion. It'll be 8.3 billion by 2030. Not too long from now. For most of the people in this audience, the young people, that's going to be your world. That's going to be the prime of your world. 50% more food needed, 45% more energy, 30% more water. Are you ready for that? Are we as a world ready for that? Are you in the Philippines ready for that? What's your population going to be at that time? How are you going to cope with that? How do you handle that? We're going to be more fully connected. We're all pretty much connected these days, but it'll be even more so. Goods, services, power monitoring, you know, adjusting the power in your home from your car and all this kind of good stuff. Faster, more integrated information access. Higher levels of robotics and automation. The World Bank says that we'll have universal healthcare by that time. I'm not sure about that, but we'll certainly be moving in that direction. Higher healthcare demands. Longevity. We're talking about an average life expectancy in certain countries of being over 90. Average life expectancy of over 90. What are the resource implications of that? And the impact of climate change. So what will that be on the production and sourcing of medicinal plants and essential oils? Who's looking at that? Who's looking at that in this country? Whose responsibility is it? Is it government, academia, industry? This is what we're seeing. We're seeing the melting of the ice caps. We're seeing devastating floods. We've already got fires. And this chart here takes us on a journey from time with respect to rising sea levels. And this area up here, where the red line is the area which looks at what has been monitored by satellite. So this is from regular human observation, and this more recently is both human and satellite observation of the changing sea levels. You have 7,107 islands here. I think 2,200, is it, are inhabited. What are the implications for rising sea levels on those islands and for the survival of those communities? How does that get dealt with? In the United States, we've got a big problem, but of course, we're not really talking about it because we're not supposed to anymore. But the reality is that this part of the United States here, Louisiana, Mississippi, and southern part of Florida and the East Coast, some of the Carolinas and Georgia, are going to be hit very badly by rising seas. If the seas start to rise by a meter, we're in deep trouble. This is Miami. People are going to have to move. There's no question. But we're not addressing that. We're not thinking in those terms. The Philippines here is the 6th most vulnerable area in the world with respect to rising sea levels. You have got to look at this as a very serious issue, I believe, for the next 20, 30 years. You can see the vulnerable areas, and the Philippines are right in the middle of this most vulnerable area in the world, along with the east coast of Africa. This is from the CDC website in Atlanta, Georgia, and looks at some of the impacts of climate change on healthcare. So what's anticipated is rise in malaria, dengue, encephalitis, a bunch of these diseases, chikungunya, respiratory allergies, malnutrition, diarrheal diseases, based on changes in extreme weather, rising sea levels, or increasing CO2 levels. So it all fits together. So what you've got to do is you've got to think internally, look at this chart and think, well, okay, what does that mean for us? How do we plan for that? How do we begin to address that? What do we need to set up? What's the expertise we need? So what will 2030 look like? This is a chart of increasing obesity in various parts of the world. Obesity means healthcare, all right? Because of all of the diseases that relate to being obese. We're on that chart. Everybody in the world, no matter where you live, is on this chart of becoming more and more heavy. Not necessarily obese, but certainly heavy. What does that mean in terms of the costs to healthcare systems? This may be our transportation, automatic cars. You won't have to drive. That'll be a blessing in Manila, right? You can just sit and program it in and off you go. And how will we live? How will this population of 8 billion people live? What is their environment? So artificial intelligence is impacting society 3,000 times faster than the Industrial Revolution did. That started in 1760. AI is applied in any place where you have lots of data, right? Because it involves deep learning systems and artificial neural networks. Intelligence, in other words, to have the artificial intelligence is not the same as having the sentience, which is what Ava, that robot, had. What happens to me if I fail? That's not answering a question directly. That's thinking about the outcome. So analyzing massive data sets and drawing inferences is the future of research. There's absolutely no question about that. We're already doing that. In natural products, we're doing that. We're not doing it enough, but we're working on it. In 2015, I put together an article with some colleagues in China, in Shanghai, on all of the data sets that come to play as we look at pharmacopoeia level standards for traditional medicines, for healthcare systems. So in other words, what is the data that's needed for that? Not because it's needed at the point of having a product, but what's the background to it? In other words, to know what it is that's active, to be able to define very clearly what a biologically active traditional medicine represents and how to standardize it. So there's a lot of science here, a lot of data, all of which has to be analyzed and processed, and this is not the place to go into that. One of my visions for the future is what I call handheld ecopharmacognosy. It's a dream. Okay, it's a dream, I admit. But, so what I want to do is I want to do this. It talks about what's called Global Archive of Natural Products. I want to create a database that has all the information on natural products, all the botanical, all the chemical, all the biological, all the clinical information on natural products. Let me tell you why. Because I want to ask a question. I want to use a little device, all right, a little handheld device, and I want to shine it on a plant, some laser technique or something like that, whatever we want to use, ramen, whatever, and say GAMP. GAMP is the name of this fancy data system like Siri is on some systems, or Cortana or whatever. GAMP, give me a summary of the principal metabolites and the most potent biological activities of the leaves of this plant. And I think many of you will recognize this particular plant up here, Catharanthus roseus, the periwinkle. And maybe 1/100th of a second later, thank you for your question. This plant is Catharanthus roseus. The leaves contain over 120 indole alkaloids, some of which are used for the treatment of cancer. Is that a dream or is that a reality? Can it be a reality? Let's have another one. It's a more practical one. Here's a field of lavender. Very, very important commercial product in the world. Very, very important. GAMP, is this the optimum time to harvest this plant? I point my little device at the plants, at the field of plants. Is this the optimum time? Goes through a series of processes. GAMP, what are the 20 best sustainable plants, sustainable, notice, sustainable plants for treating diabetes? Next one, GAMP. Come on. There we go. GAMP, please send me the carbon-13 NMR spectrum of mercantin C. It's in the archive. 1 second later or less, it's on my desktop. Impossible? No, absolutely not. That's reality. So it got me thinking about challenges. So I put together this list of challenges for natural products. General sustainability, issues with patients, traditional medicine, technology, secondary metabolism, blah, 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 blah. And I put, these come to about 60 different challenges, which obviously I'm not going to go into. But the point is, it's trying to think about the future and trying to think in terms of what it is that we need in order to improve. It's taking that step of going from the 5th step to the 6th step to the 7th step over a period of time. All right? How do you do that? You don't, unless you're very, very, very athletic, you don't go from the 5th to the 7th step. All right? You do it in increments. And then I got into another issue. Started thinking again. We think about national security. And we've already seen, obviously, the Trade Towers, World Trade Center issues, 9/11. We've seen financial security issues, 2008. We've also got food security, and the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations handles food security. But no one is handling medicines security. How secure are our medicines? And I will give you an example. There are now well over 200 prescription products in the United States that are no longer available because the companies do not want to make them because they can't make money off of them. So in terms of medicines security, how do we assure both access to and availability of medicines long term, whether those are prescription products or whether those are traditional medicines, phytotherapeuticals? How do we assure that? Who's taking care of that? And I can tell you the answer today is nobody. But one of the things we can do is to model medicine security in the same way that food security is monitored in terms of availability, access, stability, and utilization. And somebody needs to be thinking about this, and I suggest the World Health Organization, because they're the global medicine people, right? So one of the next, I don't want to talk about this. So one of the next areas that I'm going to get into from a writing point of view is medicine security. So what's the pathway for improved role of natural products in global health? It's based on many simple steps. It's not about one giant leap for mankind. It's about a pathway that involves incremental improvement. So for example, here, as in most countries of the world, your relationship between your healthcare system that comprises what we would call the Western medicine approach, all right, that standardized medicine approach, versus the traditional medicine approach is probably quite different. Right? It's like different mindsets, it's different sets of people. But they meet at the patient. They come together at the patient because a lot of people will end up taking both a prescription product and a traditional medicine or a phytotherapeutical at the same time. That's called polypharmacy, and that's a problem. That's a problem unless all the practitioners, as well as the patient, know what the issues are with those particular products. But whatever pathway you choose has to be settled in science. So in other words, the basic sciences of what goes on in a plant that's used in traditional medicine becomes a very important aspect, becomes critical part of development as a, I won't say drug, but as a medicinal agent. And bringing the highest level of quality control to those products as medicinal agents for the patient. That's the high level of science that's needed. Oops, sorry. So let's dream of a future. So I envisage natural product development as a much wider societal responsibility. All right? I don't have this narrow focus. I have a wide focus on its role in healthcare systems and its role in agriculture. in terms of thinking of natural herbicides, natural insecticides, rather than those that are synthetic, which depletes oil resources, by the way. What that takes is very high level of cooperation and collaboration. And it's not about two people getting together. It's about a lot of people getting together. Government, many different government agencies, academia, industry, for staged program development of people. Can't do anything without the people, without the trained, informed people. Information systems, facilities, but focused on the patient. Focused on the patient. Develop focused, collaborative, interactive research groups at centers of excellence. Centers of excellence. So where are the people? Where are the groups that can do what needs to be done? Are they here at UST? I hope so. I hope so. I hope you can create something that is excellent here that will serve their society to improve healthcare in many different ways. And then apply the integrated technologies, not isolated technologies, but integrated. What I mean by that is, so for example, the lavender case. The lavender case is about what's the science behind that particular process? How do you do the science to be able to say, this is a good time to pick the lavender? It's an essential oil, so it's the chemistry of the essential oil. How is that analyzed? Can you analyze that remotely? You know? It's a dream, I admit it. But fortunately, we have good dreamers. A little bit of educational advice here right at the end. Don't think clay, think putty. Don't think clay, think putty. So when you have clay and you bake clay, you've created something that's very rigid. Very rigid. That's not where we are educationally. We're in the era of putty. We're in the era of malleable brains. Everybody has to change constantly to accept what is going on and create something new. So when you teach people, when you educate, you've got to think in terms of not what you're teaching them now that's relevant, but how they can acquire new knowledge in the future. So for the students here, don't get stuck in what you know, get stuck in what you don't know. Because that's how you're going to evolve. That's how you're going to become new people. Otherwise, you're this old piece of clay. You're not a new piece of putty with a new shape, a new brain, new knowledge, new expertise that can bring new relevance to whatever it is that you're doing. So George Bernard Shaw says, you see things and say why, but I dream things that never were, and I say, why not? But probably one of my favorite dreamers is of course, John Lennon. A dream you dream alone is only a dream. A dream you dream together is a reality. So thank you very much for your time. I greatly appreciate it.
Thank you very much, Professor Cordell. At this point, we are pleased to announce that the respective lectures of Honorary Professor Takashi Okamoto and Honorary Professor John Holdsworth will be delivered today at 2:30 p.m. this afternoon as part of the College of Science Week celebration. It has been a pleasure for the University of Santo Tomas to have three renowned professors, Professor Jeffrey Cordell, Professor Takashi Okamoto, and Professor John Holdsworth in the sciences of chemistry, biology, and physics, included in the roster of honorary professors. Once again, we congratulate you and thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, we conclude the program with the singing of the hymn of the University of Santo Tomas. We all stand, please. May we request our honorary professors to come up on stage for our photo opportunity. For our photo opportunity, we start with the Dominican Fathers and the members of the Council of Regents, to be followed by the members of the Academic Senate.
The reception is at the Dr. Robert C. Grand Ballroom, second floor of the Blessed Buenaventura Garcia Paredes OP building.
Till it's over, buzzer be the mind state. If I ain't in this zone, then what you call this? They ask me how I do it, I tell them all wrist. Why y'all miss? I could probably do a backflip fade away and still watch the ball switch. Camera flash when I step up to the podium. Haters looking salty, easy on the sodium. You should plan to lose if you thinking about folding them. Even with a joystick, it's still no control. No can stop me. I'm in the zone. Competition's none in a league of my own. All about the W. I'ma bring it home when it's over with. I'ma be the king of the throne. Now who can stop me? I'm in the zone. Competition's none in a league of my own. All about the W. I'ma bring it home when it's over with. I'ma be the king of the throne. I'm in the zone. And you can't take me out of that. At the top now, but the bottom's where they found me at. So if I'm down, it's facts. I'm like Dennis Rodman with the rebound when it come to bouncing back. It's like the Bulls is at the draft and I'm 23. I'm Mike with it, I feel bad for who checking me. Passed in ahead of B, that you can never be. All about the W like after the letter V. They say they win, but I ain't heard of them cats. And since we talking about a winner, I am certainly that. AA, came to play, but now I'm turning them back. Them boys low, I'm where retired jerseys be at. Just look up. My kicks lace, my team strong. They sleeping on me, dream on. They know I ain't stopping until the ring's on. Hey, look, I'm headed for greatness, and it's the team song. Stop me, I'm in the zone. Competition's none in a league of my own. All about the W, I'ma bring it home. When it's over with, I'ma be the king of the throne. Now who can stop me? I'm in the zone. Competition's none in a league of my own. All about the W, I'ma bring it home. When it's over with, I'ma be the king of the throne. I'm in the zone, in the zone, in the zone, in the zone.
Now, let's proceed to the highlights of day 2 of the Tamashan Goodwill game. So, let's watch this. Side, as you can see, put fast break points after fast break points, but engineering's big men and as well as the offensive rebounds and putback points were enough for the defending champs to secure the victory. Now, let's move on to the next game's highlights.
Time to play the game! It's all about the game, and how you play it. All about control, and if you can take it. All about your debt, and if you can play it. It's all about pain, who's gonna make it? I am the game, you don't wanna play me. I am control, no way you can shake me. I am heavy debt, no way you can pay me.